My name is Gareth Aden, and I'm a member of the Nashville Bar Association's Historical Committee. And I'm here this morning as a part of the Bar Association's Oral History Project. And it's my great pleasure to be taking the history of a leading Nashville property and real estate attorney, Wesley Turner. Wes, good morning.
Good morning, Gareth.
Let's start at the beginning. Tell us your birth date and where you were born, please, sir.
Well, I was born on August 3rd, 1952. I was born in Springfield, Illinois. My families on both sides, mothers and fathers, are all native Tennesseans, but my dad went up there to work, so that's where I happened to be when I was born. So I've been a native of Illinois all my life because of that.
Well, tell us your father's name and a little bit about what he did, please, sir.
My dad was Gene Warren Turner, and he made a career after leaving Illinois in the University of Tennessee Agricultural Extension Service. And so he was a county extension agent, and then moved up in the ranks in that. And so my early years and my growing up years were really spent. My family was in ag, as we said. They were in the ag business, and that's who we were.
And let's now go to a person that I know was also extremely influential in your life, and that's your mother. Tell us her name and a little bit about her.
Well, my mother was Charlotte Ann Thigpen Turner. Thigpen was her maiden name. She was from Memphis, and my mom and dad met at the University of Tennessee. She was a home economics major, graduate, taught home economics. In fact, was Miss Home Economics in 1949 at the University of Tennessee. Interestingly, she was also a member of the debate team at UT, and I didn't know that until just shortly before her death. I asked her, I said, "Mom, why didn't you tell us that? We found some newspaper clippings." And she said, "Well, you didn't need to know." So that was interesting that she kept that all these years.
How about brothers and sisters?
I have one brother who's younger, 5 years younger, Glenn, and he has also made a career in the Agricultural Extension Service, recently retired from that, and he is in Sevier County, lives in Sevierville.
You've already told us that you were not gone from Tennessee long after you were born. Where did you move back to, and what was your dad doing at that time?
Well, my dad actually began with the Agricultural Extension Service, and that brought him back to Tennessee, and we were at Hardeman County, Bolivar, in West Tennessee, very rich agricultural county, and then moved to Decatur County in West Tennessee, and he became the head extension agent there. It was very interesting. My earliest through the second grade was spent there, very rural environment, and a great place for a boy to grow up. So I used to make farm visits with him there, and we lived in the last house on the end of a town of 500 people. So that was a very great environment.
And how about your dad's next assignment after Decaturville?
Well, at that point, we moved back to Knoxville, and he finished his master's degree in agricultural economics. And my mother taught school there at Galbraith School, and we stayed there a year. And then after that, moved to Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, where Dad was an extension agent in Lawrence County, and so we spent 2 years there.
Was your mom teaching there also?
No, she had not. She didn't teach after my brother was born. She stayed out of teaching until he actually got into school, and she went back.
Mm-hmm. What grades were you in Lawrenceburg?
Lawrenceburg, I spent the 5th and 6th grades. Went to Old Public School. 4th and 5th grades in Lawrenceburg. 4th and 5th. Went to Old Public School there, which was old and actually pretty rough. And then went to Ingram Sowell School. Ingram Sowell was a favorite son of Lawrence County, an admiral. And So I had 2 good years there. Learned how you had to be tough though to live in Lawrenceburg. It was a tough place for me, at least. My apologies to anybody from Lawrenceburg. But
Well, something tells me that you're going to move again for the 6th grade.
well, we did. My dad advanced in the ranks of the Agricultural Extension Service and got recalled to Knoxville to be a specialist in that work, not county specific. And so we moved to Knoxville and lived in South Knoxville for a while, and then moved to West Knoxville. And
That's quite a move, actually.
quite a move. It's different. South Knoxville is more. It was a working class community, and actually I enjoyed living there a lot. People were just very kind people and very sharing people. And then moved to West Knoxville and went to Bearden High School for a year when it was actually in Bearden. The Bearden High School that's there now is not in Bearden, but the Bearden High School I went to was, at least for a half a year, was in Bearden. So spent grades 6, 7, and 8, and half of 9 in Knoxville there.
Right. How are you doing in school, Wes?
Well, I did pretty well. I thought I was smart enough to be a B, and A student. I probably could have done better if I'd really buckled down at that point in life, but I was always okay academically. But I wasn't the straight A guy. But
Well, I'm sure your mom had
Right.
some influence on that.
she
too, being
did.
a
She
teacher.
probably would have liked for me to move it up a notch at that point in my life, but that's right. Well, my dad, too. My dad went on to get a doctorate degree. He actually, when I went to college, he went back and got his doctorate in education at the University of Tennessee. So they were both very accomplished academically. And
We're at the point now that I think you're through with the 9th grade there in Knoxville at Bearden. Did you move again?
yes, Dad became a supervisor of West Tennessee in the Extension Service. So we moved to Jackson, and that's where I went to high school. And actually, I still have a lot of ties there. And moving a lot of places, it's hard. You say, well, where are you from? And when anybody asks, I'll say, well, I'm from Jackson, because that's where I have my roots and feel
Right.
like that.
Right. Did you like Jackson?
I love Jackson.
Yeah.
After I got when people have grown up together, it's hard to break into that. And so it took a year or two, but once I got acclimated and got my friends and so forth, Jackson became a very comfortable place.
Now, your dad had moved into a pretty high position by this point. I guess he was in charge of agricultural extension work in the western part of the
Yeah,
state.
he was actually associate director of that, so there was another gentleman who was the director, but Dad was, that was a really good advancement for him.
Yeah. What about your mom? Was she back teaching?
She
or-
was back teaching. She taught first grade at Alexander School in Jackson. If you're from Jackson, you'll know where Alexander School is. And then she retired from that after I was grown. So she taught, a lot of years there in the first grade. I meet students still today that had her at Alexander School, which I appreciate.
Did you finish up your high school at Jackson?
Yes, I finished at Jackson High School. I was the last class of the old Jackson High School in 1970, and after that they merged Mary High School, which was actually virtually across the street, and made Jackson Central Mary. So that was an interesting time in history, but that's when that all happened.
You had mentioned to me in the past that something that kind of had an impact on the future of your life had happened while you had a project at school. Tell us about that.
Oh, you're probably talking about in the 9th grade, we had to make a report on what career we would like to follow. And I thought about it, and I chose law. And so I made a report on being a lawyer. wrote off to law schools. I think I wrote to Vanderbilt and University of Tennessee. I don't think Memphis State may have not even been in existence, which I ultimately went to at that time. But if it was very new. And so I found out about what it took to be a lawyer and about lawyers, and I called a lawyer. I didn't know any lawyers. At least I didn't know I knew any lawyers. Turns out I did know some lawyers. I didn't know they were lawyers. But I called a gentleman in Jackson, Mr. Walter Drake, and he asked if I could come interview him, and he allowed me to do that. I remember he was in the Pythian building after the Knights of Pythias in Jackson. So I went up there to downtown Jackson and talked to Mr. Drake, and he told me all about it. And I thanked him, and I wrote my report, and that was my first inkling that I might be a lawyer, because nobody in my family was a lawyer that I knew. I didn't really know I knew sort of what lawyers did, but I thought it might be a fit for some reason, and so I pursued that.
You know, there were a couple of things I think that were interesting in your formation there during high school. One was your church, and I think your family was very active.
Oh yes, we were very active in actually in Jackson First Baptist Church, but wherever we went. In fact, at my father's funeral, my pastor said that whenever we moved, our family, my dad was like Abraham. He always built an altar, and that meant going the first week to the nearest Baptist church we could find, generally the First Baptist Church, and we didn't delay. We joined and entered right in. We were very active people, and that was a tremendous, and is today, a tremendous influence on my life.
Any other extracurriculars at school that you wanted to, sports or anything else that?
Well, I did in high school. I went out for football, and I was on the team. I was not a stellar athlete, but I think being on the team and doing that has been a benefit to me over the years, and just the discipline of it and the pride of having worked for a goal and achieving that. So that was a good thing. I took Latin in high school. That was interestingly, my dad said, you need to take Spanish. That'll be more practical. And obviously he was right. If I knew Spanish, that would be a good thing. But I sort of knew, something told me that having the Latin would be a benefit to me, and it has been. Taking Latin in high school was a big thing. So being in the Latin club and all that was, it probably didn't help me with Latin, but it was something I remember and something that was enjoyable.
Well, here we are, and you're getting ready to graduate from high school, and I guess, 1970?
1970.
What were your thoughts about the future?
Well, my thoughts about the future were probably not very far-reaching. I went to school at the University of Tennessee at Martin for my first 2 years. Many people go on pilgrimages across the country looking at schools and all that. Not me. Dad and I went up to Martin and signed up, and that was kind of the way I went. And so I kind of had in the back of my mind that a legal career might be eventually for me, but at that point I was not devoted to that. I was just kind of went to college, and I had an interest in things like politics and history and those sorts of things. And so if I had a budding legal career, it was probably far back in the recesses of my mind at that point. I wasn't really pressing it.
How did you like Martin?
I really liked Martin as a place, but the thing that I didn't do at Martin was become really involved in student life, which if I had it to do over again, I would join everything I could, but I didn't, and it was just 50 miles from home, and everybody left at 4 o'clock Friday. That campus was deserted. So after a few weeks of seeing that, I deserted it too. So that was my experience with Martin. Although I look back on it as a good time, and I made some good friends, and I have nothing but good thoughts about it.
You know, I should have asked you this, but I don't know if we really loop back, it'll apply to college too, but what did you do during the summertime?
Well, I worked at the West Tennessee Agricultural Experiment Station during the summers, and which, was where my dad's office was, so I knew all the people, and we did horticultural research, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. It was hard work, but it was hard farm work. We simulated we had machinery come in for most agriculture, but we didn't have that. We simulated machinery, which meant we just worked 10 hours a day, and we grew tomatoes and peaches and asparagus and corn and whatever, cantaloupes and melons and all kinds of things. And so I did that and loved that work. And so I did that really all through college in the summers.
Okay. During the school year, or years at Martin, did you have any jobs while you were a student there?
Yes, I worked in the cafeteria at UT Martin, and I started in the dish room, and I worked up to cashier, which and then I quit. So my career in food service was over at that point. Also worked banquets. I enjoyed that. I've enjoyed just about every job I've ever had. I've always liked to work, and so it's been an interesting. There's a lot of you meet a lot of interesting people, and the thing that those jobs did for me was I realized I just kind of saw how people live. They had a lot of part-time jobs and whatnot, and you just see the range of human activity, which to be a lawyer is that's what we do. We deal with human beings and all their variations.
I could not agree more. As you got up into your junior year and senior years at Martin, did you sort of decide on what your major was going to be during your...
Well, I think I just kind of by default hit political science, and I transferred to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville my junior year. And so I decided that probably would be a better move for me, and I think it was. And so I finished at UT in '74, and I majored in political science. And I think I just sort of did that by default. I didn't put a lot of thought into it, and to do that pretty well guaranteed me that I would have to go to law school to support myself.
Well, did you like the Knoxville campus?
I love the Knoxville campus and still do today. My family, my parents went to UT, my brother worked for UT. We went to UT football games from day one. My first experience in Neyland Stadium was when I was very young. So UT's always been a big part of my life. So I think in retrospect, would have been probably good for me to just started there. But I'm of all.
Did I think you told me that you also got acquainted with the Smoky Mountains?
Oh, very much. When I was at UT, I spent a lot of time hiking, exploring around the region, Smokies, hiking the trails up there, and really enjoy the outdoor. And I also did things like I went and planted trees on strip mines. They had I worked on the ag campus there from my work. I had a part-time job in agronomy research. And so from that, I found out about they would take crews on Saturday mornings up in the mountains to plant trees on strip mines. And that was hard work. You would walk up and down these strip mines all day and stick a tree in a little crevasse you made with what's called a dibble, which is a shovel that's straight, and then put it back.
I've used one, believe it or not.
You know what a dibble is. And all day long, you walk up and down those strip mines, you'd see them just snaking across. You'd stand at the top of the mountain, they'd snake across the horizon, and there'd be maybe 300 or 400 yards of strip of the mountain that they had mined. And so And most of the time you're walking in rock, you were planting trees in rock. And I've often wanted to go back if I could find those places and see if those trees actually grew. You planted pine trees and black locusts. So that was an interesting thing.
How were your grades in school those last 2 years at Knoxville?
They were fine. They were B's and A's and so forth. So
Were you
probably
dating
could have done better.
Were you dating anyone?
No, not particularly at that point.
Yep.
That came later. So
So, Wes, here you are. You've had a pretty successful college career. You're getting ready to graduate. What did you decide to do?
well, interestingly, a family friend, Dr. Wayne Brown, who was vice president of Union University in Jackson, decided to run for Congress. I'd actually known him from my church, and we're good, close family friends. And he decided to run for Congress in the 7th Congressional District, which is rural West Tennessee, was at that time rural West Tennessee for the most part of Memphis. And so I majored in political science. And so he asked me if I wanted to work for him in that campaign, and I did. And so I became one of his 2 paid staffers for the campaign. I made $300 a month till we ran out of money. And it was a great experience because I accompanied him all over West Tennessee and other places, and I saw really how the business, legal, professional world worked. I became exposed to that world for the first time, and so that was a great experience, and it just really was a change to me because I had to, put myself out there. Really sell yourself is what you have to do in politics.
Exactly.
And so now,
Exactly.
when the Democratic primary came, he ran as a Democratic primary, and we unfortunately came far short of the mark. And so there I was, instead of going to Washington as a congressional staffer, I had to get a job or figure out what my future would be. But I learned from that, do not let your future depend on politics, because it's not there's not a guaranteed paycheck in that. So it was probably a good experience.
Well, what did you decide to do after the campaign failed?
Well, after the campaign was over, I looked for a job because I knew that living in my parents' basement, which literally was what I would have had to do, was not an option for very long, because there was never any question about that. So there was a recession on in 1974 at that time. I thought, well, maybe I'll get a construction job, and then law school was kind of in the back of my mind, but I thought, well, I'll just stay out a year. I'm kind of tired of school, been doing it all these years, but I couldn't find that kind of a good job. And so I did the first part of after that, I worked in a cotton gin in Humboldt, Tennessee for the ginning season, which was actually a good experience because my hands and feet were so cold. We worked 12-hour shifts. Cotton was coming in, we worked. It was not hard work, but it was long work and it was cold work. And I said, I've got to get inside in the winter. And so I decided at that point I should go to law school. Of course, I already had a year out, so I applied for the LSAT, and with no preparation whatsoever, I took a Saturday off from the cotton gin and went to Memphis and took the LSAT. And then I went back Monday and, kept working. So that was my preparation for going to law school. People take courses and all this and take it multiple times. Not me. I just took it.
Straight up.
Straight up.
Well, you, I presume, got off some applications.
I did. I applied to Vanderbilt, which was,
Yeah.
as the law says, the law does not require one to do a useless act. Well, that was a useless act. But, and then I applied to the University of Tennessee, which I thought that's where I might go because I'd been to college there. and then to Memphis State University.
And this is a fascinating story because I know you know the story, but tell us what happened.
Well, I wanted to go to UT because that was where I'd gone to school, and Memphis, the prospect of being in Memphis didn't really fascinate me. I'd been around Memphis my whole life. My grandparents were from Memphis on one side. And so, but I got in Memphis State, and I was on the waiting list at UT because my LSAT score was not as good as it could have been because obviously I did no preparation for it, and I think I finished about half the test and so I must have aced the other half because I did well enough to get into Memphis State, but UT put me on the waiting list, and finally they called and said there's no hope, you can't come to UT. So I went to Memphis State, and they started earlier. They started at the 1st of September, and so I started school in Memphis, and it was hot, and I was thinking I so want to be at Knoxville. And so my dad called one evening after I'd been in school 3 weeks or so, and he said, UT is called. They said they've got a vacancy, you can come. So I said, great, I'll packing up tomorrow and go. So the next day I called the business office at Memphis State, and it was too late to get my tuition back. So that guaranteed that I was going to be a student of Memphis State University School of Law.
They wouldn't give you your tuition.
They wouldn't give me my money back, so I could not go to UT. But that was probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me because at Memphis State, I thrived as a law student, and I became involved in everything I could, moot court, law review.
Study
Every
hard.
student studied hard, studied constantly. I made up for whatever I had not achieved in previous and was able to do very well, and it worked out very well for me. The law fraternity, everything I could do at Memphis, I took advantage of every opportunity that was there, and that was a good thing, very good thing.
And your grades, I think, were very good.
They were very good, better than I had ever done at the top of the class, so I was very fortunate.
You know, a lot of law students, if they can, will, at least during your second or maybe third year, try to clerk outside of law school. Did you do any of that?
Yes, I clerked, beginning actually I think maybe a little bit even in my first semester. I clerked at the downtown Memphis law firm of Hoffman, Hughes, McWhorter, and Weiner, which was a personal injury law firm basically. Jerry Hoffman was the primary leader of that firm, and they had a system where a law student would be a law clerk there at the firm, and then that law student, when they left, would have to get the next clerk, and they kind of will it to the next person. And so a guy named Nick Klein, who willed that position to me, and so I worked there my whole part-time, my entire legal career, and it was a great experience. They let me do everything you can imagine, and I became exposed to every avenue of the law, and mainly trial law, but they also had things that, since they were trial lawyers, basically, when business things came in, they would rely on the law clerks to do a lot of research and investigation and these kinds of things. I also learned a lot about personal injury at that time. We did a lot of investigation and were involved in a lot of research on a lot of briefs.
Didn't you have one case in federal court that ended up having a big impact on your life?
Well, yes. When my last year of law school, my last semester of the last year, Mr. Hoffman represented, this was so interesting, he represented the AFSCME union. That was the union that Martin Luther King had come to Memphis to support in the garbage workers strike when he was killed in 1968. Mr. Hoffman represented that union. This was I finished in 78, so add about 10 years to that situation. And he routinely represented them, and he had an arbitration proceeding in federal court before over the firing of a African-American woman who was a Memphis city court clerk. and the allegations were that there were court dockets that had been destroyed by being flushed down the commode. And so obviously this was big news in Memphis at the time, and Mr. Hoffman represented the union grievance for the lady, and it was in arbitration per their agreement in federal court. And so, or under the supervision of federal court. And so they had done the hearing, and they had these voluminous transcripts. And so Mr. Hoffman said, and I'd worked for him for 3 years at this point, so we had a very good relationship and did a lot of, was fortunate they relied on me quite a bit, and I tried to return that and do the best I could do. He said, I would like for you to analyze these, and I want you to write a draft of the arbitration brief. And so I actually didn't go to class for 3 weeks, and I stayed home and basically poured through those that record, and I wrote the arbitration brief.
Wow. And
he tweaked it and did whatever he reviewed it and turned it in. And I found out after I graduated that we won. So that was a great experience.
Great, exactly.
Exactly.
That's an experience to remember. Was there also a case that you worked on where you had a foreclosure issue?
Well, I learned about quite a few of those, not in law school as much. I actually got a job as a law clerk at my current law firm, Gullett, Sanford, Robinson, Martin, in 1977, and Val Sanford, who was a lion of the bar, called me in his office one day, and it was so different from Hoffman, Hughes, McWhorter, and Weiner. Hoffman, Hughes, McWhorter, and Weiner was a personal injury firm, great environment, but it was 3 sheets to the wind as far as atmosphere. I mean,
yeah.
It was just wild and woolly, going and blowing. The clients were all there in casts and neck braces and all that, everything that entails. Well, when I came to Gullett, Sanford, Robinson, and Martin, which is the summer of my second year of law school, it was actually Gullett, Steele, Sanford, Robinson, and Merritt at that time. Gil Merritt was there, who, of course, later went on the Sixth Circuit bench, or actually went on that before I came, but he was there when I was a law clerk. It was very quiet, and you just went in there and kept your head down and did research. And so Mr. Sanford came around to me after I'd been there a week or so and said, would you come into my office, in his patrician voice? And he said that I'm anticipating a challenge to our Tennessee foreclosure procedures on the basis of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And I would like for you to research this and prepare me a memorandum on this subject. I said, yes, sir, and went back to my Carol. I didn't know the first thing about foreclosure. But I spent the rest of the summer doing other things as well, researching, learning about foreclosure, researching the constitutionality of our Tennessee foreclosure procedures. And actually, that turned into my law review note, Power of Sale Foreclosure in Tennessee, which is actually published in the Memphis State Law Review. And then I've had a specialty in that my whole career. I've taught mortgages at Nashville School of Law since 2002. Exactly. And that's what I've taught, or a big part of it. So it was all based on Val Sanford calling this scared young law student into his office and asking me to give him that memo. So
that's a great story. But there's also one about how you got your clerkship at Gullett Sanford. Tell us that story.
Well, when I decided to go to law school, I didn't have any really contacts with many lawyers, and I decided that Nashville would be the place to be. I was a young single guy at the time. That changed before I finished law school, but I decided I wanted to come to Nashville, and my uncle, one of my uncles who lives in Nashville, still does, pulled me aside at a family gathering and said, I know a lawyer named Jack Robinson. Actually, Mrs. Robinson and my aunt are still very good friends and close friends. and said, "I'll be happy to introduce you." And I didn't know Jack Robinson from anybody or anything about it. But Mr. Robinson, of course, was a partner at then Gullett Steel, Sanford, Robinson, and Merritt, and a very prominent law firm in Nashville, and very well-respected firm. And so I said, "Sure, count me in, however you want to, whatever." So before I even started law school, he invited me up, and Mr. Robinson took my uncle and myself to the Cumberland Club, then the Cumberland Club, and we had lunch. It was in the top of the L&C Towers, I recall.
At that time, it was in the L&C.
It's the corner of 5th and Church. And, no, 4th and Church. And so we had lunch, and I said at that time, "Mr. Robinson," because I thought I wanted to try to come to Nashville at that point. And I said, "Mr. Robinson, do you think I could get a law clerking job maybe the summer after my first year?" And Mr. Robinson said, "Well, we usually just like to hire Vanderbilt students, and then you got to be on the law review. So I doubt that there's much basis for that." So I said, "Okay." So I went to law school, and after the first semester, for the Christmas break, I got my grades, and so I appeared at Gullett, Steel, Sanford, Robinson, and Merritt, which was I think it was on the 23rd floor of the L&C Tower at the time, had the whole floor, and just appeared there and asked for Mr. Robinson, and I said, "Mr. Robinson, here are my grades, I've gone to law school, do you think I could get a clerking job next summer?" And he said, "Well, we just like to hire Vanderbilt students, and you got to be on the law review." And I wasn't at that point to do this. Getting on the law review is just a matter of grades at Memphis State. So after the second semester, I did the same thing, kind of the same answer. I just appeared. Third semester, I actually got on the law review. So I brought him my grades. My grades kept going up, 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 and got on the law review, and he said, "Well, I guess you can come on."
You had him backed in the corner.
So then I came as a law clerk after my second year of law school, and that's how I got there. Persistence paid, and there it pays, and I was a law clerk with another student from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and another student from Vanderbilt University. 3 of us were law clerks there together.
That is a wonderful story. So getting that law review position made all the difference.
I think it got me into my current law firm that I've been at now for 43, 44 years as your partner.
I guess so. I take it that when you graduated from Memphis State Law School, you came to Nashville and joined the
I
Gullett
did.
firm.
After I was a law clerk, they extended me an offer. So I guess something went right that summer, and I had a great summer with them. Worked hard and tried my best to do everything that needed to be done to make a good impression. So they offered me a job, and I took it on the spot. Mr. Sanford said, you can have many days to think about it, and I said, "I don't need to think about it. I accept."
Okay, this is going to be really fun. Tell us, if you would, take a few minutes and tell us about the lawyers you were practicing with back in the day of about 1978 at the Gullett firm.
Well, at the Gullett firm, I came in 78. Started, I guess, 2 days after the bar exam, and then worked there before I was admitted. And then when I got my word that I'd passed the bar in October, I, of course, went on as a lawyer. And I really worked with everybody there. Val Sanford, Jack Robinson. Mr. Sanford did high-end constitutional litigation. He represented the retired judges in the state. He represented the consumer finance groups. He represented people on complicated issues, complex issues, and I wrote briefs for him and helped him with that. one of the highest compliments that's been ever paid in my legal career was when he represented the appeal of the retired judges before the Tennessee in their about their pension benefits with the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, and they had changed the provisions of the system, and the judges said you can't do that, and Mr. Sanford had that position. He asked me to write the brief, and I wrote the brief on that, and he used that verbatim, did not just sign it. And if you knew Val Sanford, that was the highest compliment he would pay you. He didn't toss out compliments. In fact, I never heard him give one, but I took that as the highest compliment, that he just signed my brief.
Well, having known him, I agree. That's an incredible story. He didn't change it at all.
Didn't change it at all. I worked for Judge Thomas Wardlaw Steele some. Judge Steele was there for a few years. He, of course, is the one man, one vote principle. He was a chancellor in Nashville. He wrote the first opinion on that at the trial level that went up, became the law. Worked with Jack Robinson, who's been my mentor all these many years, and he did estate probate work along with all kinds of other things. And so then I did real estate all through that.
Had Jack Robinson been president yet of the Nashville Bar
No.
when you joined?
He became president of the Nashville Bar probably 83, 84, something like that. And he was a catalyst of a lot of change in the Nashville Bar. A lot of the things that we take for granted in the Nashville Bar today started during Jack's tenure as president.
Right. Wes, everybody knows where you're headed, but we don't know how you got there. How did your practice begin to center on real estate?
Well, when I first started, I thought I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I had done moot court and so forth, and I had been pretty successful at that, and liked being on your feet and whatnot. And then I did everything. I did the trial work. I did help people with it. I did it at really a pretty high level with Mr. Sanford, on constitutional even issues, and then I helped others with other cases. But I also did real estate because we represented then what was Home Federal Savings and Loan Association, became Metropolitan Federal Savings and Loan Association. And so there was a kind of a availability of work to do there, and I just kind of naturally fell into it. So I did that all the way, and a lot of the litigation I had was related to real estate. And so I found that for me, trying lawsuits was not as enjoyable as I thought it might be. I didn't like the uncertainty of it. Many people like that. I didn't like the fact that there's about a 50% chance of getting a good result, and then even if you win, the clients may not be happy. So I found the office practice, trying to keep people out of court was much more satisfying to me than trying to deal with it once you were there with all its uncertainties. So, and then the client we represented at that time, the major client was Metropolitan Federal Savings and Loan. They got into commercial lending in the early 80s, and all savings and loans did. And Mr. Robinson was asked by the management there to take on a lot of the work in the commercial area. And so he asked me to get involved in that, and I did. And we did a lot of work, and all over the country, really, dealing with commercial lending. And I learned commercial lending from some of the best. Got to work with some really great law firms here in Nashville, people at Bolt Cummings, which was then Bolt Cummings, the old Dearborn and Ewing firm, Bassbury and Sims, Walter Lansden, and other places here, and then around other places in the state and around the nation, really doing commercial lending at a high level, and I learned from them, and so I kind of learned on the job, and so that's really how I got into the commercial area, although have done the residential as well, kept that because that's where I started in real estate, and so particularly a lot of construction lending, residential lending, really anything to do with real estate. And so that was kind of my immersion in that. And that period of time, till about 1990, was really it was hectic and a lot of work, but it was a lot of good work, and I was immersed into the commercial and residential area, I think, at a very high level, and was very fortunate to have that, because I got to see a lot of people in action, and I learned from that.
Well, I think that Scott Derrick and I joined the firm sometime between 85 and 90, and I
Right.
remember that you basically were the head of that department that did commercial and home lending legal work.
Right.
And we're deep into it as sort of a day-to-day thing. One other person I wanted to ask you about, by this time, of course, I think even when you joined the firm, was Alan Lentz already at the
Alan
office?
was already there. Alan had been there since he's been there, retired this year, so it was 50 years this year. So I guess 1971, and then I came in 78. So Alan was already there. To me, he was a quite seasoned lawyer, although he was very young.
And he did some property work, but mostly commercial.
He did mostly commercial, or most things that we do have some real estate component to it even. So he did a lot of that. And Alan was a great mentor to me, a great friend, great mentor. Alan was good at handling things, really. He knew how to handle difficult situations properly. And he could add that. He was a great lawyer, but then he added that component of being able to work with people to really come to good resolutions of situations very well.
Well, we've come to a point that I think is one of the most interesting challenges to your law practice, and that was the morning when all of the black cars drove into the basement parking garage of Metfed and shut it down.
Well, that's right. That was April something, 1990, and our mutual partner, Scott Derrick, and I were in a conference room going over a case that some transaction I had handled had turned into a lawsuit, and we were going over that, and then somebody came running into the room and said that they've taken over Metropolitan Federal, and that had happened. The Resolution Trust Corporation, which was at that time the agency that was resolving failed savings and loan associations, which there were hundreds of them across the nation, they were closing down. They closed that institution down. And so all of a sudden that work just stopped, which we were going very fast, constantly, just tremendous work, and that work ceased at that point.
Wow. Well,
We closed the file and never opened it again.
here's the best moment, though, of your practice. Tell us how you met that challenge. I'm sure it was a shock.
Well, it was. We knew the institution was in trouble, and so that was not an unexpected thing. But when something like that happens, it's kind of like death. It's a shock, particularly when that's been your main client, your bread and butter for these many years. And so at that point, we regrouped. We pulled in and regrouped. That was actually about 20% of our business as a law firm. So that was a significant contraction financially and work-wise that year. But we pulled together and regrouped, and so over the next few months, the loan officers I had worked with just started going back to their previous banks. They went to Third National Bank, First American Bank. I guess we still had Commerce Union at that point, and they went to other places. And a lot of them were kind enough to call me. I stayed in touch with them, and so I developed over the next few years a strong diversified real estate practice and lending practice from them. And then so that was a big component of the practice. We had other clients as well. It wasn't all our clients. We had other real estate clients, developers, builders, individuals, buyers, sellers. So we had a really strong practice, but that was, the backbone of it, the nucleus of it was the lending work. And which I've always found to be the case. If you're going to be in real estate, you better have some lenders because they're kind of there all the time, and they always have money. So that's an important thing. So I followed my lending clients to other places, and over the next few years developed a diversified, strong real estate practice based on that, and that has persisted to this very day.
Well, I remember thinking after that year and a half or 2 years watching what you did, that you ended up actually being in a stronger position than you were before, even though you had this great practice from just one client.
Yes, it became over time because you're diversified, and actually the practice was better because it had a lot of different sources. And so that's exactly right. It was, I guess it was a blessing in disguise, at least, that aspect of it.
Who else, Wes, coming on now more toward the current era, who else sort of joined you in real estate practice and has worked with you in real estate over the years?
Well, there have been some really good people over the years. Justin Milam, who now he decided after a number of years with us to go back to Milam's Optical. Justin was a strong law partner for a good period there, so I look back at Justin very favorably. I've had good staff. I've had a great one paralegal, Linda Turner Ray. She was there before I was, and she has been really a right arm to me in the real estate practice over these many years. She's actually retiring at the end of this year, so I have to say Linda was a great colleague as a paralegal. Had many others. Let's see, we've had Marcy Shelton was with me for many years, and enjoyed working with Marcy.
Right.
Kathy Pennington was with me for a number of years, and she enjoyed working with Kathy. In fact, I've had some really great colleagues to work with. And then today, we've got Will Smith has been my associate and now partner over the last 10 years, and he's doing a fine job. Heather Derrick, Scott's daughter, has come on the last 4 years, and she has been really coming on as an associate. And Will Brown's working with me at this time, and other paralegals as well. They're just really got a good staff.
Has the nature of that practice changed really over the years?
Well, it's still, it's more open. It's interesting. The nature of what we do, really the basics, has not changed, but it's speeded up. It's like everything else in, technology has made everything come they want it instantly. People think that real estate, should be slow and plodding. It's not. It comes and goes with warp speed. And you got to be able to do that because clients, they demand it happen very quickly. So it's also become more open. When I started getting major real estate clients, was pretty closed. I was told when I came to Nashville, a comment was made, I don't know how you'll make it because you're not kin to anybody. I didn't have a brother-in-law who was whatever. But that's all changed now. It's a very open field. If you want to work and you can hustle, you can probably work if you're good enough and do quality work and have the relationship skills to get the business. You can probably achieve that now.
Has the incredible growth of Nashville over the last 10 years, has that also impacted?
Yes, we've had, because we've been, usually real estate is historically cyclical. And, I've been through at least 4, maybe 5 up and down cycles, and it goes strong, starts out very high, and then it just falls off the cliff and stops, and you can't buy a real estate closing. Nothing's happening. And last one was 2010, like 9 or 10. And you could see that coming. And we are way overdue for that. We have been on the up cycle since then, and it just keeps on coming. Also, real estate practice is a lot of it is a product of interest rates. When I first started in 1980, started in 78, 1980, interest rates went up to 18-20%. And so to see them down at below 3%, who would have thought it? So, but we're overdue for a correction. So maybe one's coming. I'm sure one's coming. We just don't know when it is.
Tell us a little bit about how you met your beautiful wife and got your now very large family going.
Well, that's great. Well, that's a pleasant thing to talk about. Well, I was in my first year of law school, and one of my roommates was trying to get another guy that lived close to us to go on this dance. His sorority sister tried to fix him up with this girl to go to this dance on the Memphis Queen, which is a riverboat. It's on the leaves from the left from the levee. I guess it's still there, and you do cruises on the Mississippi down there. And so they asked my roommate and me if we would go, so try to get this other guy to go. And so I said, yeah, if you'll get me a date, I'll go. So I did, and they got me a date with Vicky, who became my wife. And so we went to the rendezvous for our first date, if you know Memphis, and then we went down, parked on the levee down in Memphis, and got on the riverboat, and it was a beautiful early May night, and we rode around out in the Mississippi, and the rest is history. So 2 years later, we were married. And we had a very successful 39-year-and-a-half marriage, and have 3 children and 12 grandchildren to show for it. One of my son-in-laws is actually my law partner, Rob Hazard, today, which is a great joy of my life that he's able to be there. And so we have 12 grandchildren. Vicki, unfortunately, passed away a little over 3.5 years ago now. So
she had a disease that really kind of plagued her in the latter years.
Yes, it did. She had lupus.
Yeah. Lupus
erythematosus. And she was actually diagnosed with that the month that Metropolitan Federal failed in 1990. So she had that for over almost 30 years and fought it hard. Vicki was a registered nurse and great mom and great professional. She actually went back to Vanderbilt after we were married and had children, and got her master's degree, became a nurse practitioner. And so, but the lupus intervened, and she basically nursed herself for many of those years.
Yeah.
She was involved in the Lupus Foundation, did a lot of counseling for people with lupus, and then she, lupus was not probably the direct cause of her death, but I'm sure, not diagnosis, but I'm sure it was probably the indirect. She died from complications of breast cancer surgery, and I think probably her immune system reacted to that, and that's what caused that.
Yeah. But she worked for a lot of different medical institutions.
Yes, when we first married, she worked at Baptist Hospital as a staff nurse, floor nurse, and then she worked at St. Thomas in Vanderbilt, and she really loved orthopedics. She was an orthopedics nurse, particularly at St. Thomas was really her thing she loved most. And I think had not lupus intervened, she would have gone on to have a very long career with that. But after the lupus came, it really was all she could do to kind of take care of that.
Right. Wes, tell us about your children and what they've ended up doing.
Well, I have 3, 2 girls and a boy, and they're 2 years apart each. And Becca, my oldest daughter, is married to Rob Hazard, who's my law partner, our law partner. And Becca's a CPA. She went to Baylor University and has 4 children. Works part-time at Blankenship CPAs now. But she's a great mom and a great professional and just a great person. So been very fortunate there. Our middle daughter, Sarah, is 39, just turned 39, and she is a trained social worker, and she she's married to Kyle Hunter, and they have 3 boys, and they live in Franklin. And he works for Tractor Supply, doing a very good job there. And she actually works at Rolling Hills Community Church part-time in Franklin. So she's putting her social work to good use there, I think, in what she does with that.
How many children does she have?
She has three
Okay.
boys. And then my son Will is 37, and he is a pastor in Mount Juliet. He's the pastor of Silver Springs Baptist Church in Mount Juliet. He's been in the ministry for the past 15 years, I guess. And so they lived away in other places for most of that time. He was a youth minister, and now he's a senior pastor at the church in Mount Juliet. And they have 5 children. Carrick, who's 13, he started out as a pound-and-a-half preemie. He was a pound and a half, and he's now a 13-year-old guy. He's doing great. You never know it. And 4 others. He has 4 brothers and sisters to go with them. So
Wow.
that's great. I've been very blessed with great kids and grandkids. Very fortunate.
I was going to say, I think you have more grandchildren than anybody I know.
Well, you'll meet some that have more, but it's not a lot. People say to me, they say, "Oh, I've got 3 grandchildren," which is great. And they say, "How many do you have?" I say, "Well, I just have 12."
It's one of the best parts of getting older.
Oh, it is.
Let's take just a minute and loop back to your legal career and your firm. And I think the firm changed and added departments, new departments and elements that helped it over the years. Tell us a little bit about that and what you recall and what has seemed important.
Well, that's a good question. I think, have made a conscious decision to grow and to be able to remain an independent law firm. And we started that really when you and Scott came. I think it was 1985. I think the old Hooker Keeble firm, great law firm, was breaking apart. The things had changed there. And so you and Scott came, and we've been partners ever since. And so that added a very strong dimension to our litigation area. And so we really, were able to add a strong level of trial work there when you and Scott came. And then right after that, Martin and Cochran was another long-standing law firm here, and that was Ray Busey, Tom Forrester, Linda Knight, Ted Harris came over, and they did primarily at that point bankruptcy work. They did heavy-duty Chapter 11 work was the main thing they did. And interestingly, we kind of saw that coming. We saw that, we were involved in all this closing stuff, and, we knew we could see the storm clouds on the horizon with that. And I was actually the firm bankruptcy lawyer at that time, and I knew that I was not adequate to the task. Like a lot of things, I just kind of picked it up and did it because somebody had to do it. And so I was over there a lot on, pretty minor matters, really. And so I encouraged that, and others did as well. And so that was a great addition that actually, when the downturn of 86, tax law of 86 was passed, and that really put us in a recession. And so the bankruptcy carried us for several years. And then George Crawford came. George was had been with several law firms in town, and came over, and he added the dimension to our business practice and lobbying and that kind of thing that was really a plus for us. And George added a lot of enthusiasm too. You can have specialties and you can do the law and all that, but you need to have some fun while you're doing it, and you need to have some cheerleaders. And George was a great cheerleader, which I've always appreciated. I thought he added that we needed that. He put that into our practice.
Jack Robinson obviously was a leader in probate because he
Right.
sort of published or edited the book.
Yeah, he wrote the book literally.
And then tell us a little bit about that practice and how it's come along.
Well, the probate practice, Jack has been, he wrote, and Harry Phillips, who was one of the founders of our firm, Judge Harry Phillips, who is deceased, but they wrote Pritchard's, or they picked it up and carried it forward, Pritchard's on Wills and Estates, which is primary authority in Tennessee courts for that subject. And so they've continued that, and then Jack is a great one about bringing people along. I'm the benefit of his mentorship. He brought me along in many ways, and he brought others along as well. Jeff Mobley, who's not with us anymore, but Jeff's got his own independent practice, remains a good friend. He brought Jeff along, about 5 years behind me. Andrew Hedrick, who's our law partner today. Andrew's come along very well under Jack's tutelage, and now is, a major partner in our law firm in this area. My son-in-law, Rob Hazard, and then Andrew Bellum, who's a young lawyer that we have, who was actually a student at Nashville School of Law, which I'm very proud of that, the way he's come in and done very well.
And Alan, of course, basically carried on and sort of led the commercial department.
Yeah, Alan has done that, and Alan has been very good. He retired earlier, actually this fall. He was very good about bringing others on, sharing his practice and passing his practice on. So he's done a very good job with that.
Wes, let's talk about a few other elements of your life that are I know have been very important and you would want to talk about. And one is your work at your local Baptist church, and then you've sort of broadened that out to a wider dimension.
Well, yes, my faith has always been very important in part of my life, and my work in my church has been, and that's given me the benefit to, be a help to a lot of people, I think. And so I think I've had the opportunity to be on our state board here for the Tennessee Baptist Convention, so I was on that, and then the opportunity arose from that to actually represent that institution, which I've done that on real estate matters for the past number of years, which I'm very grateful for. And then I was asked to be the parliamentarian of that 5 years ago, which for the last 5 years for the Tennessee Baptist Convention, when it meets, I've been the parliamentarian. So, that's, to me, there's a very high honor, particularly when my parliamentary experience was really being trained in the 4-H club growing up. So, but, that's something you can learn. And
you can, but it can be scary.
It can be, because all eyes are on you, and you've got to make the right decision. But I've enjoyed that, and I've had the opportunity to represent a number of Baptist churches and other churches of other denominations as well. I've helped you with the Episcopalian work from time to time.
You have.
And from Presbyterians, Methodists, Church of Christ, and others as well. So I've enjoyed that aspect of it. It's been a little sideline, I guess you might say.
Well, I know that it's meant a lot to you, and it's important in your life. How about you've worked also with the Nashville Bar in some things, and I think you've chaired a committee.
Yes, I was chair of the real estate committee several years ago, and have done pro bono work pretty well continuously all through that, and so I've enjoyed that. It's been a very rewarding experience. I'll never forget the time that Alan Mazer, myself, and Greer Cummings were appointed to a committee through whoever was chair of the real estate committee appointed us as a committee for the Nashville Bar to go investigate an issue, and I forgot what the issue was today. This was probably 25 years ago. And so we investigated the issue and recommended what needed to be done. And so we met to have lunch, and three of us mutually decided that nothing needed to be done. And so we reported that we should do nothing, and that thus ended the subcommittee. So sometimes that's a good recommendation.
Listen, man, that's rare. Committees always feel like they have to do something.
No, we looked at each other and said, no, we don't need to do a thing. It's fine. So that was our report.
What about your hobbies? I know you must have some things you'd like to tell about.
Well, I love to read. I love history,
Yeah.
and I do that. I love genealogy. I know a lot about family history. My dad did that, and I've kind of picked that up from him. My greatest thing to do is farming. I don't call that a hobby because I don't want the IRS to think it is, but it's a sideline, I guess you might say, that we have a family farm here in Wilson County, and so I very much enjoy working the farm and doing all that's involved with that.
You get out on the tractor?
I do. We have beef cattle and work the cattle and cut the fields.
What do you grow?
We grow beef cattle. We grow hay.
Oh, hay
For the cows, and then we grow beef cattle from the pasture and hay.
Very good. Yeah, I knew that you loved doing that, and I imagine it's a really good thing to be able to do to get away from some of the stress of practice.
Oh, it's great. It's just 35 miles from our office, and so I can be there pretty quick, and so it's been a great thing.
Wes, travel. You and Vicki have a chance to do much traveling around.
Well, we really didn't, and I am sorry for that, but the lupus really was so active with her that it prevented what I would call active vacations. Our vacations had to be, going to the beach and kind of having a base of operation, because just going somewhere every day or different things, just not an option for that. So we really didn't get to travel much as a result of that. I've tried to make up for that since Vicky's been gone. I hope she wouldn't be jealous about it, but I walked the Camino in Spain to Santiago de Compostela, if you know what the Camino is.
How long did
pilgrimage.
that take?
Oh, well, I was there 15 days.
Okay.
And we didn't take the long Camino. You
Right.
can take any level of mileage you want to. We just walked 115 miles. I did it with 3 other buddies, and we had a great experience going across. We took the Portuguese route, which is up the coast of. We just started in Galicia province of Spain and went up the coast there north to Santiago. That was a great experience. So I had hoped to do that in England the following year, but COVID has postponed that. So
Which one of the trips were you going to take in
the
England?
Canterbury Tales.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we're going to go across the southern to Canterbury, be
That's
like
right.
the Canterbury Tales.
Well, I hope you get a chance to do that in the future. Wes, this has been so much fun. Tell us a little bit, if you will, before we close out. Any thoughts you have about looking back now after years of law practice, where law is headed? Thoughts about changes that have been made or should be made?
Well, where law is headed, my area is more technology. It's going to be, technology is going to be a major factor of it, obviously, and it'll be much more efficient, and speeds will continue to increase. I do think there will be a role for lawyers. I don't see that diminishing. I don't think it has over the years. I think our lives are more and more complex. There's more and more law and regulation, and that will mean we need more and more lawyers. And so I don't see the demise of our practice. I think it's going to change. I think it will be, technological change will be the major driver of that. But in the end, people will still need things done. They'll still need agreements. They'll still need transactions completed. They'll still need advice on any myriad of things in life. They'll still get into disputes. And so I think our profession is going to be needed. And if I were a young person coming out and I wanted to do it, and it was something I thought would be fulfilling and engaging, I would go for it. Now, if you're just doing it because you can't figure out what else to do, don't go for it.
Well, can you think of anything that I've forgotten to ask you about?
Well, I think you've covered pretty well most of the major aspects of my life. I've had some very interesting things happen along the way, a lot of which I can't talk about, as you and I discussed, because you can't talk about them.
Right.
But it would be a much more interesting interview if I could say some of those things, but, I can't, won't. So.
Well, it has been delightful to spend some time with you going over your oral history and this fascinating background that you've had. And thank you very much for
Well, thank
taking
you.
the time to give this gift to the bar.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, sir.